Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. The dangerous game of the rising federal deficit, spending more than we're making, and we'll keep doing it after the election. CNBC's Eamon Javers.
No matter who wins next week, it's going to be bad for the nation's fiscal health, likely.
It's a big deal, says our economics reporter Steve Liesman, but nobody seems to care.
Do people not care about the deficit because politicians have not made it an issue? Or do politicians not care because voters don't care?
1 week out.
Coin flip America.
Mike Allen of Axios about life on the election's razor edge.
To the very last day, it could be a landslide. One of these candidates could win 5 or more of these swing states.
Plus, the market's October surprises, and Jeff Bezos writing for his own paper about his decision that cost the Washington Post thousands of subscribers.
Do you think he regrets making that purchase?
I don't know.
It's Tuesday, October 29th.
It's Tuesday, and you know how fast weeks go. They almost go like days.
Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernan and Andrew Ross Sorkin, and gains across the board for yesterday's session. The Dow was up by 273 points. The S&P and the NASDAQ each up by about 0.25%, but continues to tick higher. That's the same story we're seeing when it comes to Treasury yields, too. Take a look right now, and 4.30 is where the 10-year stands. The 2 years at 4.14. These yields have gone nothing but up since the Fed started cutting rates. And you're watching that across the session. 30-year is at 4.55 right now, too. Crude oil prices saw their biggest drop in quite a while yesterday, 67.97. It's up by about 0.8%, but for the week down by 5.7%. That big drop came after we saw the Israeli retaliation against Iran did not include oil facilities, and that came as a bit of a relief to traders. Again, yesterday's session down by more than 6%. And then if you check out Bitcoin this morning, you'll see that right now Bitcoin's above 71,000, 71,231 for the week. That's up by about 5.5%.
DJT indicated
Up significantly, too.
52.
Really?
If it's closed at 47.36, indicated 52 to 52 and a half, 52.40 to 52.50.
We will see if the markets are better predictors of elections than the polls have been the last several elections.
It's going from 16. I feel like that was yesterday we were talking about it.
But here's the question on that. We've talked about this a little bit before. What is that? Meaning...
Well, we were talking about that at 16, too. I don't know what it is at 16. I don't know what it is at 52. All I know is it was at 16, and now it's at 52.
No, I know, but what is that? Meaning you have to be making a bet on what? That people are going to use the service
Who knows why
more?
anything?
That doesn't necessarily...
What was GameStop?
Seem to be
what
the
was
case.
That a bet on short sellers getting squeezed?
Well, that was a bet on short sellers getting squeezed. That was a different bet.
I don't know what
I imagine that this is
it's
a bet
almost
that
a
somehow...
proxy for Trump, I guess, and his
but
election chances.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't even know what it is, though, is the point.
Well, it's tripled from where...
I guess that the fortunes of the company are in better place.
It was a great discussion to have that.
Well, the question...
It was the absolute low you got, again, 16
Yeah,
to
no, I'm not debating that. I'm just saying, do you believe that more companies, big companies, are going to advertise as on Truth Social because they want to curry favor with the president? It's not that there's more people who are using the service.
Right.
No, there's no evidence.
We've watched stocks over the years with zero earnings go all over the place. So I don't know what it means. It's not based on multiple to revenue. It's not based on multiple to anything.
But then the question, if it's not based on anything, then the question is it a proxy for anything? That's all I'm saying.
Well, I mean, at this point, it looks like it's a proxy. Like the financials have gone, Bitcoin is gone. It looks like it's a proxy.
It looks like it, but
the chances for the. I mean, that's.
But Bitcoin, I can make an argument to you about why that's gone up.
You think both of them are useless?
No. You would argue that the regulatory regime for Bitcoin...
You think Bitcoin is not a store of value? You think it doesn't...
Sure, we can debate all that.
No, I don't debate it.
No, but I'm saying that's not the point. The point is that if you believe that President Trump is going to become the president...
Then how do you connect the dots to
I can connect the Bitcoin... No, I can connect
because of
on Bitcoin, because you would think that there'd be more, either less regulation or just regulations of some sort that would allow more people to have access to it. That makes sense, right?
Right.
What I'm saying is, Does this make sense?
I don't know whether
That's what I'm asking.
I don't know whether a Trump presidency translates to better future business for that truth, whatever the hell it is. I don't know whether it does or not.
Right.
But it seems that people are making that
Somebody
that
must
assumption.
be.
Well, I mean, it's just been
if
crazy.
that's what the bet is.
When was it? Wasn't that a month ago? It was like a month ago at 16. So it's just.
Meantime, reports saying that more than 200,000 people canceled their digital subscriptions to the Washington Post yesterday. This apparently happened after Jeff Bezos' decision to block an endorsement of Vice President Harris for president. That would be about 8% of the paper's paid circulation of 2.5 million subscribers. In an opinion piece that was posted last night, the paper's owner, Jeff Bezos, said presidential endorsements do nothing to tip the scales in an election. What they do is create a perception of bias and non-independence. He said the decision not to endorse the candidate was a step in the right direction to regain America's lost trust in media. I don't know the full reaction. It's been a little back and forth. I think one of the things he said was he wishes that the timing had been different, which is to say that he had wished that if they were going to make this decision, they hadn't made it in this moment, as opposed to if they could have made it 6 months earlier or a year, so that it wouldn't be viewed in these other ways. It was a fascinating piece. I don't know if you had an opportunity
I didn't read through
to
the
read
whole
it.
thing, yeah.
It really was, I thought, quite extraordinary.
He said he's going to hire a bunch of conservative journalists too, just to
he
try
didn't
to,
say that in the memo.
Well, maybe not in that, but
that
he
was
said
the
it
story. But I
yeah.
don't think that was what was really going on. I mean, what I thought was so interesting about the piece was he said years ago he had written that he said, owning the Post is going to be a complexifier for me. And he said in the piece, he said, what I've also realized is that I am a complexifier for the Washington Post, which is to say, he goes on a very interesting sort of dialogue about, he said, look, my wealth and my businesses invariably, if you look at this just from appearances, from the appearance, perceptions of conflicts and other things from the outside, you can make the argument that I am not necessarily the ideal owner of the Post. But if you believe that, given my wealth and businesses, that I can be a bulwark for independence, that's going to be one side of it. And if you think I'm, a big conflict, I'm,
do you think
I'm
he
on the other.
regrets making that purchase?
I don't know about that part. But it was just I don't think so, because he makes a very vociferous argument at the end about how he really wants to improve the paper, how much he cares about journalism, how actually he thinks that there's too much misinformation on social media, too much information on podcasts.
That the perception of the Post
I found the piece convincing. I know there were other people who had, who thought
you don't
found it
think
less
that
convincing.
something needs to change for mainstream media with the perception and the way that it's that it's covered all these issues and the perception that it has now in the American
that he said
public.
That actually was, to me, the most interesting part. He said, not only do you have to get it right, people have to believe that you've gotten it right.
Right.
Because
I don't think that he would tell you that they're getting it wrong. He would tell you that people believe that the media is getting it wrong. And that's actually a very big distinction. The question is, how can you get back that trust? He believes, on a principled basis, that the reason he didn't make an endorsement was because he didn't want people to think they were trying to tip the scales
I
one
think
way or the
he's
other.
right. If they would have made that decision 6 months ago or even longer, before there was even two candidates in the race.
Where we disagree. To some people, the media bias in mainstream media, and I'm sorry, the New York Times, whatever you want to talk about, is as plain as the nose on your face. It's there, and it's got the mainstream media down to about 5% approval. So,
no, he talks about that. Did you read the piece?
I hope that this is a beginning, because every time you say democracy dies in the darkness in reference to that paper, it makes me chortle. It makes me, I have to laugh out loud. So God bless him. The only problem is it looks like he's worried about a relationship with Trump, and that it just looks like he's worried about his other ownership of other entities.
Ownership
and
of
worried
this newspaper
that,
is
like
not,
so many people are worried about enemies within.
And that's a
Jamie
question.
Dimon now is totally backed off from any
right. And the question is, do you think that's a good thing for America?
I think
by the way,
something.
talking about silencing people. Former President Trump talks about free speech, and one of the things that's happened, I would argue, as a result of worries about demonstrable intimidation, is that.
You mean from the perspective of him not allowing them to endorse?
Probably.
No. What I'm saying is you have all of these business executives who used to be very public with their views. We talked about Warren Buffett last week. We talked about Jamie Dimon, who used to actually donate to candidates under his own name. Bill Gates, other people, all sorts of people who have engaged in the political process in the past. But I would argue to you, in a I would say, Governor DeSantis world, and perhaps now if we're going to move into a President Trump world, that one of the reasons that they are not actively talking about their own views is because they fear retribution.
I think they fear retribution from customers who disagree with their viewpoints on these things.
It's the Target tuck-in cans, and it's the Bud Light. They don't want to go on either side of anything. It's not just Trump is bad. They're scared of what he's going to do.
Look, I will also say Trump in the past has been pretty vocal when he's angry and he goes after a company. You think back to GM, you think of all the ones that he's targeted over time. But I think the bigger issue with these CEOs not wanting to do it is
just on either
half
side.
Their customers.
Sneakers, Republicans buy sneakers too. But the big change between 2020 is no one in the corporate world felt comfortable even saying they might vote for Trump. And now you've got a few, Silicon Valley. There's still, most of them are not saying anything, but there are a few that have come forward at great peril to their business as well. So I just think it goes both ways. You think it's all, and I think that there could be retribution from either side. But I just don't think at this point it looks like you're going to have to worry about retribution from Kamala Harris's side.
Well, who knows? We're a week away from the election.
Well, I don't know, but I believe the betting market's a lot more than other people. Right now, it's 3 to 1.
That's the question. Are the betting markets going to be a better proxy than the polls have been in the last several elections?
And nobody knows. But it could be crazy if all these things, Bitcoin, what we were talking about, DJT, all these, the betting market, they could all be wrong. They could all be wrong. And this time, when people wouldn't say Trump last time, and that padded his events, maybe
the polls are a better reflection at this point.
Maybe they are saying it. Maybe they are saying it.
Did the polls? You could even argue the polls over-rotated. I mean, the polls over-rotated in 2022.
That's what.
Right, and they could be over-rotating now, where everybody who is voting for Trump has said I'm voting for Trump instead of not.
A week from now, I think we'll have a much better idea.
It's Tuesday, and you know how fast weeks go. They almost go like days.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, the giant elephant in the economic room. Our federal budget deficit is set to grow no matter who wins next week. CNBC's Steve Liesman says no one cares how big the debt gets. Well, he does.
What really worries me personally, covering economics, is if we do have a downturn, what is the fiscal space of the government to help?
And CNBC's senior Washington correspondent Eamon Javers, he cares too.
Republicans didn't do it. Democrats don't do it. It's not something there's political will for. So I think Steve is right. It's the bond market.
We'll be right back. This is Squawk Pod with Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
You know, it's a week from today. I bought some milk yesterday. Do you know what the expiration date was?
Next week?
November.
No, the 13th. 8 days after the election, the milk will still be.
Well, yeah.
So it's coming. It is coming. It's going to be 8 days after the election. I'm still going to have that.
Green
milk.
bananas.
Consumes you when you look at those dates.
What's that?
When you look at the date, it consumes you.
No, I go all the way to the back. Don't you?
Yes, to get the
You do
freshest
too?
stuff.
To get the freshest stuff.
Because they restack the,
Do you tell your people to do that?
Your people.
That's pretty much how I don't even know to tell
Your
them.
shoppers.
I don't even know to tell them this.
No, they already know.
Hopefully
Because you
they
got
know.
the best people.
Can only hope.
Yeah.
I got to talk to the office, the
manager of the other people.
house manager
Of
to
the
find
other
out
people.
whether they know
Exactly.
these things.
Okay. Beautiful.
I'll make a note of that.
You are watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernan and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
It's a joke, folks.
It is.
We got a special programming note because CNBC is going to be live all night long. We should just get Lionel Richie to license us the song. On election night next week, we're going to have the results as they come in and some reaction from some of the biggest names in business. It all starts at 7 p.m. Eastern from the New York Stock Exchange. We're going to have live coverage in the overnight hours as well with results, plus Asian and European markets. And then, if you haven't slept and you want to keep going, Squawk Box is going to start at 5 a.m., where, by the way, hopefully by then we'll actually know what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's
join us. And make sure, of course, you stay with the CNBC election night coverage all evening.
That was the prediction from Mike Allen off camera from Axios. He says he thinks we will know at 5 a.m. That'll give us something to talk about, something to dig our teeth into.
I thought that too, but your aura ring is going to be horrible.
Be up all night
that day,
watching
5 a.m. Yeah, being here.
I just think listening to Lionel Richie on repeat all night is going to be something.
Thank you for that earworm. All right, right now, we want to get down into the national debt and deficit issues. Those are some of the key issues actually driving the economic conversation this election cycle, especially as they relate to which candidates' plans could cost Americans more money in the long run. Eamon Javers and Steve Liesman are both here on set this morning to talk about this. We're going to start with Eamon and then get over to Steve. But Eamon, welcome.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Great to see you in person. This new analysis that we're talking about today comes from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. It was released Monday, and it finds that both candidates' plans will hike the national debt, but that former President Trump's plans would be much worse for the federal budget. According to the group, Vice President Harris's plan would increase the debt by $3.95 trillion through 2035. And former President Trump's plan would increase the debt by $7.75 trillion in that same time frame. Now, take a look at the three scenarios that they lay out here: the expected Trump deficits, the expected Harris deficits, and the baseline forecast under current law. There are big uncertainty ranges here, depending on the assumptions that you make about how the policies would play out. The group estimates that Vice President Harris's plan could increase the debt by anywhere between $300 billion and $8.3 trillion through 2035, while President Trump's plan could increase the debt between $1.65 and $15.55 trillion, again, over that same time frame. Now, the most costly elements of Harris's plan, well, it's extending the Trump tax cuts for those making less than $400,000 per year, which would cost $3 trillion over the 10-year period, and expanding the child tax credit and earned income tax credit, which would cost $1.4 trillion. Donald Trump's most expensive items are extending the full Trump tax cuts, which would cost more than $5.3 trillion over the time frame, and exempting overtime income from taxes, which would cost $2 trillion. So no matter who wins next week, it's going to be bad for the nation's fiscal health, likely. We're talking about massive increases in debt and deficits as long as the eye can see. 2035 is a long time from now.
With this, I have deja vu. This was the same study from 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago?
They updated, yeah.
Oh.
They had one early October and updated with new numbers.
Right.
These candidates are throwing out proposals, right? So you got to keep everything going.
Every time.
But this is the same people, because the ranges were the same. It's either like a dollar deficit or 40 trillion.
And look, neither candidate's putting out a whole lot of detail around these plans.
Right.
So
and there are
you
questions
have to
about what either of them can get through, depending on the Congress.
Exactly. Congress is the big difference maker here. Who has control?
We're going to talk a lot more about this in just a moment. But Steve, why don't we bring you in? You're taking a look at the economic implications of those ever-rising deficits, what that's going to mean.
So what Eamon just told you is what could happen to the deficit depending on who wins. Here's what's going to happen, even if nothing changes under existing law. The deficit's going to rise as a percent of GDP. Interest costs will soar to continue to be a bigger part of the budget. They already eclipse defense and Medicare spending. One more thing. No one really seems to care, not the politicians and not the broader public. So the economic risks are that surging interest payments force spending reductions in other areas of government, that all the borrowing crowds out private sector investment needed to boost growth and productivity. And finally, the market at some point says no mas. The ever-increasing supply of government debt and auctions fail, or the buyers of debt demand far higher interest rates. Maya McGinnis from the previously mentioned Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget says, there is an invisible fence. We don't know when we run out of fiscal space until we do. We might be about to find out. The CBO projects the deficit will climb over the next 10 years by $1 trillion. That's before any of the stuff these other guys add, to nearly $2.8 trillion, or 122% of GDP, debt owned by the public, and interest payments will top $1.6 trillion. To be sure, deficit hawks have warned about troubling outcomes at much lower levels of debt, and those concerns have not materialized. It might be because rules could be somewhat different when you are the world's reserve currency. Whatever the reason, data from our first quarter CNBC All-America Economic Survey shows concern with the deficit is low. Of 14 issues we asked about, deficit ranks just 10th, far below inflation and even below China and corporate taxes. You do have to squint, Joe, in order to see the deficit on that chart. We have to remove a bunch of the 14 even to make that chart fit. Here's the question. Do people not care about the deficit because politicians have not made it an issue? Or do politicians not care because voters don't care? It might be only when the bond market makes clear that the level of debt is unsustainable, that anybody ever starts to care about it.
Those invisible fences, I've seen them. They do not work for dogs.
Do they work for the bond market, though? Do they work for the bond market?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're walking by and a
Rottweiler
Rottweiler
wants to
coming
come
at
out,
you, not to worry. There's a fence that doesn't
on
work.
the other hand, we have a dog down the street who doesn't go past the fence, which is
You
never
do?
on it, the fence is
That
never
thing's
on.
turned on high.
My neighbor keeps the
That
fence
must be
off,
it.
but we just had another dog come through the fence.
it goes right
This is
through.
the issue, and I was going to ask the question you put at the end. Is this because voters don't care about it because politicians won't talk about it, or politicians aren't going to talk about it because the voters
When
aren't
you
pushing
got
it, and
people
it's not
going
going to
around
win you an election?
When you got people going around the country saying, "Here, you take this, you take that, you take this,"
It
Free
has
money
been
for
the
and
most-
there's no
it has been the
blowback.
most- yeah, it has been
at
the
least
most
the Committee for
unbelievable.
Responsible Federal Budget is trying to put it on the table, as are we here. That it should be something. Look, I've been sort of a deficit dove over many years. It's been kind of the right call, but then you reach a point where you're like, I don't know what that fiscal space is anymore. What really worries me personally, covering economics, is if we do have a downturn, what is the fiscal space of the government to help?
Look, the way Washington works is that every single dollar of federal spending has a constituency, right? Somebody benefits from that dollar who will scream and yell if it's cut. And so politicians just don't want the political pain of cutting anything. So they
they're
come
bad
in and they
managers.
say, we're going to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. And then they go in and they find the waste, fraud, and abuse. And someone is benefiting from every one of those individual dollars. And so they don't do it. Democrats and Republicans, when in complete control, historically in recent years, have not done anything about the deficit. Republicans didn't do it. Democrats don't do it. It's not something there's political will for. So I think Steve is right. It's the bond market, right? Ultimately, if the bond market says you can't borrow anymore, you can't borrow anymore. But we don't want to get
to that point.
Because at that point, it's a very, very ugly
it's a
fix.
big problem. Look, there's a question now, even if the bond market cares about this. The New York Times had a story earlier this week quoting an investor saying, like, investors really don't care about the supply of treasuries. It's other things that are driving treasury prices, not necessarily
Can I just
how
tell you,
much
Eamon,
treasury is issuing.
That's been true.
Yeah.
It has been true that you could not make a trade based on supply. Supply was something the market took down, and even people warned about it. I'm not sure that's true anymore.
When did it change? Or what?
I
how do we
think
know
in
it
this
changed?
case, we don't know that it's
Yeah.
changed,
Yeah.
but we
the
saw,
process.
for example, I can't remember now, was it last August when the Treasury kind of made a mistake and misjudged the market and its appetite for longer term coupons? And they said, well, here's too much of it, and the market really rejected it.
No
And the Treasury came back and readjusted the tenors of what it
And
was issuing.
there is a
happening-
piece in the Journal today saying yields are increasing on some of these fears.
Just-
So maybe
Did
the
you
bond
see
market is starting to
Sabadra
pressure, which is a
on
little
her-
scary.
She
Yeah.
said that the coupon there is something coming soon, near term, about whether they have to do
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, on
morning,
Wednesday.
8:30. I think at this time
and
we'll have
you
it.
could actually know that they're.
We'll know what the next quarter
But sooner
of
or later,
funding
it just
is.
seems like it's just too much to try to float, and people are going to say, "I want a higher yield."
Can I just say a funny thing? Rick and I have this running kind of argument, well, among other things.
Yeah, among other arguments.
So he comes out and he judges the bond market based upon the indirects and the
Tails
foreigners. He
and
says
all
it's a B or a C. I give everyone an A.
just for
because
doing
it's
it.
not
Because
buyers.
they're selling it. I'm like,
Well, now you're-
65 billion of
Yeah,
debts.
but
You ever heard of
Steve,
that?
you're
They
working on
sold
pass.
it. It's an A.
You're working on pass fail.
You're grading.
Not pass fail.
Pass it.
If they
Right.
sell it, it's good.
Right.
You know, when Rick's like a couple points, look, he's
You're
doing a
grading
great
on
job
this.
with that.
You're
I'm
giving
joking about
Ivy
it.
League.
So think
You're giving
about what
Ivy League
happens,
grades.
though.
You're grading on this.
Think about what happens,
curve.
though, if the bond market says to the U.S. government, you can't borrow anymore, or you can't borrow
Or
at these prices
at
anymore.
these prices. And,
Yeah.
and by the way, they've been going up substantially. It's taking up more and
Right.
more of our. It's more than defense spending.
Can
But the political shock from that, you're talking about a 2008 style event, I think, in terms of the way people will feel about it. The resentment that people across the country will have toward Wall Street when they sense that big bankers are telling the government that it has to cut all the spending that they benefit from.
How is that the bankers' fault? I mean,
I just
coming
think that
from
will be
investors
the
who are
way
out
it will be
there.
perceived
Well,
in the
that's
country politically.
If that's the
because
case, then we have a bigger problem with our electorate being informed about this stuff than it is.
I think we do have.
Let me give you the good news, though.
Yeah.
There is good news here. The good news is America is an enormously wealthy country. If you looked at America and graded it on its ability to pay, in other words, if you did a debt to asset or debt to income ratio, we are doing fine. The issue is the political will to pay, which is one of the reasons one of the credit agencies downgraded it. And the market gives the government tremendous leeway to sort this out.
Yeah.
So it would even be just the announcement or some sort of momentum towards a plan Not even executing the
As
plan.
Warren Buffett has always said, though, even wealthy families can overextend themselves.
That's true.
And you can make
That
too
is
many
true.
promises.
That is true.
Again, we are all kind of waiting to see when that catches up with us because we all understand.
But
we all
having the
balance our own
exorbitant privilege,
expenses
but
at home.
having the exorbitant privilege of the dollar being the reserve currency gives us leeway. If we came up with a plan and said, okay, here's over a 10-year or a 20-year
we're gonna get there, then people would believe
We're going
it.
to solve this. And it's like one of those things, I'll clean out that closet tomorrow.
It didn't work with Simpson Bowles, and we're still arguing over all this
It's
stuff.
true.
You want the U.S. government to live like the old money family with the old Volvo and the hole in their sweater, not like the rock star who's out there
The
blowing
question
it
is,
on
how
Ferraris.
can you create this sort of tipping point, friction point, where people think that it needs, without actually creating the true tipping point?
I just don't think
by the
you
way,
can.
back
We can't either.
a decade ago,
Politicians won't
2011,
respond.
when we were doing the Simpson Bowles conversation, there was the sense that the world was about to fall off its axis if we didn't get our act together.
But
And
maybe we've cried wolf too many times.
No, I'm not disagreeing.
Look,
I'm just
I mean,
suggesting when is
The deficits did go down during the Obama administration, right? If you look at Obama trajectory for deficits, it goes down a bit every year. Deficits went down under Clinton because we had this huge economic expansion. I mean, politically, the easy
Clinton
way out
also
of
cut
this is
spending
growth.
on some of these issues.
Yeah,
Clinton was able to.
Yeah,
cut
the easy way
spending.
out of this
Wow.
is a lot of growth, and then you
that's-
can suddenly say we can mask some of our
That's one
deficit
very
problems.
quick negative here, which is that the thing that's extraordinary is the level of the deficit at full employment and with an expansion
Correct.
at 3%. That's the thing that worries me more than
And-
anything,
right.
is the
They're not
idea that
emergency
this is a
deficits.
time when the deficit should be stable to falling, when you should be, what did they say in the Bible, gathering
Saving for a rainy
the
day.
grain for 7 years
Yeah.
of famine.
Saving for a rainy day at this point. We're not.
Right.
Eamon, Steve, thank you guys both
Thanks.
for a serious conversation.
Next on Squawk Pod, the election countdown continues. Great. With Axios co-founder Mike Allen.
Public polling, everything's within the margin of error, but it has been a little bit Trumpy.
We'll be right back. You're listening to Squawk Pod from CNBC.
3, 2, 1, up and Andrew. Q is Mike.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. Former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg recently donated about $50 million to help an organization that's backing Vice President Harris's campaign. That donation reportedly follows months of arm twisting from Bloomberg's friends and associates, including Bill Gates and LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman. Bloomberg has previously donated late in election cycles because he believes he can find strategic gaps and unmet needs. This after other donors place their bets. We are exactly 1 week away from the presidential election. Joining us right now is Axios co-founder Mike Allen. Good morning to you, sir.
Morning, Andrew.
Impart some wisdom to us. What do you think is actually going to happen here?
Yeah, two things. So the last time I talked with you, I said that Republicans felt like they were winning.
Yes.
Democrats felt like they were blowing it. The first half is more true today than ever. We have a great story up on Axios today from Zachary Basu saying that Republicans are all about projecting an air of inevitability. And that's a little bit what the Garden event was about. But I can tell you behind the scenes, they actually believe it. They really believe that they're winning.
So you don't believe that that's not a strategic thing, that's an actual thing.
That's right.
Okay.
A top official, someone who's been with Trump the whole journey, said we've never seen data this good. Now, Democrats who were
What data are they looking at? Like
like
just
state by state.
And are these pollings or is
Yeah,
this the early voter turnout?
Well, this is it's both, but public polling, everything's within the margin of error, but it has been a little bit Trumpy. But that's why this optimism that they're projecting could be foolhardy. That it is a coin flip election. Jim Van Dyke and I had a great column about coin flip America. And like to the very last day, it could be a landslide. One of these candidates could win 5 or more of these swing states. It absolutely could be Vice President Harris. And I can tell you, Democrats who were a little down in the dumps the last time that we visited, they're feeling better. Two things. One is that they think that the Madison Square Garden rally might have been a real own goal, that Latino voters who matter so much to Trump. This is really broken through there. Who knew that Pennsylvania had a big pocket of Puerto Rican voters, but I can tell you the Trump campaign knows that now.
How do they blow it with that much money? I mean, she's had, we've had, I don't know how many people talking about $50 million they've given her, over $1 billion. She's bought every ad you can buy between here and there. So what is she screwing up with all that money?
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons that Democrats are more optimistic is tonight at 7:30 she's doing her event from the ellipse with the White House in the backdrop. Mm-hmm. I'm told that she wants to help voters visualize her in the White House. And Becky, this is the problem.
Is that legal?
Is that voters still say the SNAP campaign, they want to know her better. And you look at it, we see the data on the show every day. The percentage of people, 65% plus, who think that America's on the wrong track, despite a lot of the macro figures we see here, like that may turn out to be insurmountable. That's the big fear of Democrats. The flip side is they feel very optimistic about the ground game, the turnout machine they have in place, and they feel good about the fact that suburban women really are going to care about reproductive access.
So I have two questions. One is, one of the sort of implications of the report that you have this morning around the confidence that the Trump campaign has is that it is setting up, if you were to lose, a sort of conspiracy that he really won. Can you speak to what that is?
100%. And the story points out that Republicans, in building this aura of inevitability, like cherry pick their own polls, their own news, their own predictions to try to get their echo chamber to just reflect that. And that's one of the big problems with this election is Axios, Jim and I have written about the shards of glass. The media ecosystem that all of us grew up in has shattered. Right. And the individual ecosystems don't talk to each other. And so the MAGA ecosystem, all they see is this good data, what's happening, and it sets the stage for them to say this is rigged, for them really to believe it's rigged. It's going to be easier for Elon Musk, who keeps sharing misinformation about ballots and voting irregularities. It's going to be easier for them to go out and say, see, we told you.
You have to assume that the betting sites are just either young Republican men are predominantly on the betting sites, or you just have to be in total denial, because there are certain swing states that are 3-1 Trump now. And all of them across the board, not just Polymarket, but if you look at the RCP average, it's like a 2-touchdown. And a team that's down 2 touchdowns wins all the time. We see that. But you feel pretty good about your team if you have a 2-touchdown lead on the betting side. You're just totally, you haven't even mentioned them. And they're clearly have gone like this.
Yeah, no, there's some signs that there's like big buys going into there.
We've looked at that. We've looked at that. That's true. 28 million in Paris was what they came up with after the Wall Street. That's not going to move $1 billion market, and that was only Polymarket. So that's a false.
No, but the betting markets are fascinating, and they're part of this shards of glass phenomenon.
Well,
that even
that'll have to be totally wrong, and it could be. It could be totally wrong. It's been wrong before. We saw it's flipped.
No, but the reason this is important. The reason it's important, and the reason I'm glad you mentioned it, is it's one of these examples of how the news is different. Whereas before it was the lead of a newscaster front page, memes, prediction markets, blogs, polling average, all that.
Bitcoin, DJT, financials. You can look at the Trump trade, and it's going to be very surprising.
Two other related items while you're here.
There's no question about the Trump trade is super bullish.
One is if you would weigh in on the Washington Post. Obviously, it's a competitor of yours. The Jeff Bezos op-ed last night, firing back at his critics. What did you make of it?
Jeff Bezos, this will resonate with your audience. First 2 words, Jeff Bezos, customer first, right? Axios is audience first, they're customer first. You look at these cancellation numbers reported by NPR, and they weren't considering their customer. I can say the endorsement itself, like the freak is way overplayed, that no one would be surprised by their draft editorial about Vice President Harris. We all could write it, and no one's going to change their vote on it. And that's part of the argument that Jeff made in the op-ed that posted overnight. It's in the print paper The
You guys
thing
don't
that says a
endorse
note
anybody,
from our
right?
owner.
You guys don't do an endorsement, do you?
We don't. Axios is clinical, always clear-eyed, fair to all sides, connected to all sides. We've never done
So you
opinion.
kind of agree
And
with
that's
But he
part
doesn't
of-
run you don't have an editorial page.
No, and that's very
right.
deliberate. That's part of
Right.
building trust. That the most important
Same thing that Bezos
in this age
Well,
of
they
the
still have an
shadow
editorial
class.
page, is the point, though. It's a totally different piece. The second thing I was going to ask you is,
People are more likely to trust you if they don't
right,
think you're putting your
but what
thumb
do
on
you
the scale.
what do you think of the argument we were having at the table earlier about business leaders who have decided, for whatever reason, not to speak out about their political views, and that feels like a shift from a decade and 2 decades and 3 decades ago, generationally, and specifically around this past 10 years, and maybe this campaign even more so?
Well, over time, you've thought they're secret Trump voters. Like, is that still true, or what are your combos showing?
I think some are, and I think some are. I think some who are voting for Harris are scared to say so because they think that there's going to be some form of retribution. I think there are some folks who might actually be Trump voters who are worried, frankly, about what their employees think, actually, more than even necessarily their customers. But I think what's fascinating this time is, and it speaks to this endorsement issue, which is that right now, and I was saying it as sort of a post-DeSantis. See, to me, the DeSantis piece of the Disney battle was such a watershed for a lot of business leaders who said, oh, there actually can be real retribution, like an actual business
Andrew, all
shift.
along, I've thought anyone that looks
And
at...
I'm curious where you land.
No, I know, but anyone that looks at filibuster, Supreme Court stacking, raising corporate rates, unrealized capital gains, what CEO would be backing Kamala Harris in the first place and afraid to say so? Why would they do that
Well, then
in the
you
first
should
place?
you should go call those people. You should call all
I
the people.
will. It
Go
just
call them,
looking
Joe.
classically-
Putting aside their
But
secret
putting
secret
aside-
classically at the way
vibes,
things-
answer
It's-
Andrew's
Yeah.
question.
She's the most left-wing that we've had
wait,
since Dukakis.
What do you think,
Joe,
Mike?
Mike's here. I
Who
want
in
to
their
hear.
right mind?
But Mike spends a lot of time with CEOs talking to them about
Who
these
in their
issues.
right mind
Mike.
would pick the far left?
To answer your question, putting aside their secret proclivities, they're thinking about audience first. One of their big audiences is internal, their colleagues. And we've realized in recent years how important, like, the mission of the company, the higher purpose of the company, the organization is to the people who work with us and for us. And so when we talk to CEOs, our advice is, like, stick to issues that where your company can make a difference, where your organization has credibility, and there are going to be plenty of those. And that's why in Axios, we've put a big emphasis on January 21st. What is going to happen under the new president, looking with our friends at FSG at the different scenarios for what if you have Trump run the tables, what if you have Democrats run the tables. Like, organizations should be focusing on that. They're not going to change what's going to happen November 5th, but they sure could change what's happening in the 76 days between Election Day and Inauguration Day, and after there's a new president.
Mike Allen, thank you, sir.
Thank you for your
See
coverage.
you. Check out Axios, of course.
And that is the pod for today. Thanks for listening. Remember to tune in to CNBC on TV election night. We'll be going live late into the evening with an extra long Squawk Box starting at 5 a.m. on Wednesday, November 6th. And Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Yeah, every day. This podcast gives you the best of our TV show. Listen anytime you want when you follow Squawk Pod. That's it. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.